we have our first ever serial entrepreneur on Founder Stories. I can't introduce him as being the founder or CEO of one business, so I'm so delighted to welcome Luke Pilfold Thomas.
Today's guest is Luke Pilfold Thomas, a founder, investor, and advocate betting on brave founders and bold ideas. He partners with businesses navigating change, bringing sharp strategy and a bias for action. From digital transformation to go-to-market pivots, Luke works where technology meets business and where vision demands results.
You don't tend to be the face of any of the companies that you work in right now. What's the reason for that?
I would say most founders that I encounter, it's not their safe space. It's not why you start something. It's not why you go into that journey thinking, oh yeah, I want to be lit up everywhere. I think over the course of my career, I've probably always found that I'm just better behind the scenes. I don't like the limelight.
What you're saying is you can absolutely be successful being behind the scenes and not necessarily being the face of something, and that's perfectly okay.
One of the things that I'm a pretty big advocate of is that hiring people to do the things you're not good at is the wrong place to start from. We'll see the company through your founder lens. They won't. And what they will do is they'll leave because employees leave, because that's what happens. If you put all of your eggs in that finance manager's basket and they leave, who's going to pick that up?
How can founders who have so much talent to grow businesses very quickly, very big risk for appetite, maybe they don't have lots of savings, but they have all of the other makings of a business. Do you have any practical tips around how can they fund their businesses to make sure that they don't end up on the pile?
Yeah, I think from a personal standpoint.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Founder Stories. I'm Donna from The Engine, and when I was on my way into the studio this morning researching my guest, I realised something. I can't introduce him as being the founder or CEO of one business. We have our first ever serial entrepreneur on Founder Stories. So I'm so delighted to welcome Luke Pilfold Thomas from insert hundreds of companies here. Luke, welcome to Founder Stories. So how many companies are you actually involved in right now in some way, shape or form? And what capacity do you tend to get involved?
So I think actively at the minute, it's about 4. So I guess my portfolio ranges from some people that just want cash through to some people that want cash and support. So I tend to try and keep probably 3 or 4 active investments at any one time. So yeah, it's 4 at the moment.
If you had to take a guess at how many companies you have either invested in or been part of over the course of your career, what would you reckon as a ballpark?
It's probably pushing 15 at this stage, I
Yeah.
would say.
Cool. So loads to talk about.
Yeah, for sure.
Lots of companies, but safe to say that the brains behind and the finance behind many, many businesses, successful, failed, whatever, I'm sure there's a range. But what I really think will resonate with some of the listeners of this is that you tend to be in the background a lot. You don't tend to be the face of any of the companies that you work in right now. What's the reason for that?
It's an interesting one. So I think I would say most founders that I encounter, it's not their safe space. It's not why you start something. It's not why you go into that journey thinking, oh yeah, I want to be lit up everywhere. I think over the course of my career, I've probably always found that I'm just better behind the scenes. I don't like the limelight. It's not something that interests me. I don't want to be famous. I don't want to be an influencer, anything like that. And I think that often when I'm trying to focus energy on those sorts of things, as said, naturally who I am, but B, I think for me, I maximize value when I'm giving people, as I put in a post the other day, sort of the pen to write their own story. I think that's the impact that I have on people. So I prefer to see them succeed and grow rather than myself.
That's really cool. And I think that will definitely help some people who are thinking about starting in business, because I know personally there's a real pressure to, okay, first thing you do when you start a business, make sure you've got an Instagram account, make sure you've got a TikTok account, make sure you're super visible, build your personal brand, selfie, selfie, selfie. And to some people that just doesn't come naturally and it's not their state. So what you're saying is you can absolutely be successful being behind the scenes and not necessarily being the face of something, and that's perfectly okay. And I suppose that comes from kind of childhood, really, and the type of person that you are, your DNA, your kind of upbringing. So is that kind of representative of how you were, like, as a student, as a kid, kind of being in the background of things? Talk to us about you as little Luke.
Yeah, I think it's, and I wrote about this when I did my MBA quite extensively. So when people talk about the role of leadership, it's not something that I've ever actively sought. Now, I think it's something that I've always been pushed into by other people. Clearly, there's a natural disposition there to do it. People tend to want to listen to the things I have to say, but it's not something that I've actively ever gone after. So I think as a kid, just pretty humble, pretty quiet for the most part. But I think I'd probably fit a little bit of that mold well, though I'm clearly intelligent. I wouldn't say I'm academic. I have this conversation with my wife a lot, and it's like she would outperform me in 110% of exams if we were to sit them side by side, because it's not the way I am. But I think, yeah, from an early age, you could tell that there was something there. So I think a couple of things that probably spring to mind as platforms for where I am today. I think always pretty good at reading and writing. So I recall being sort of 8 or 9 and a test being done to sort of figure out what your reading and writing age were. Mine came back as something like 18 to 21. And when I reflect on it, I can see how I was bored in class. And I was very fortunate that I had a teacher in English at that stage that probably recognised that in me. And I think having those sort of mentor, coach, teacher type people in your life are really important, really powerful. And she was one of them. So she literally one day brought me in a bunch of books from her own collection and a dictionary, and was like, be quiet and read. And yeah, I don't know many other 8 or 9-year-olds that have read the Odessa Files. And words I didn't understand, I'd look at them.
You like Matilda?
Maybe.
A real life Matilda.
Real life Matilda, yeah. Yeah, and then I think as I sort of look forward from there, I think, again, as I said, it's certain things you can pick up on. It's not naturally who I am, but I was sort of pushed into those roles, be it by teachers, parents, in sports team, whatever it was. So I think they start to shape you. And even sat here today, this is completely out of my comfort zone. And I think a common misconception about me by people is that I'm very sort of extroverted or charismatic or confident or whatever word you want to put on it. But that's not true. I think my safe space is introverted. It's, for me, again, people I think like to see extroversion as those characteristics I mentioned rather than about where you get your energy from. And for me, getting my energy doesn't come from people. And I find at the end of the day, 7 or 8 hours of meetings, conversations, deep thinking, I'm absolutely wiped out. So again, I think that plays into the person you see today that doesn't want to garner attention, that doesn't want to garner limelight, because I'm much better away from those type of environments, just getting stuff done, really.
Well, thank you for putting yourself on the that line outside of your comfort zone. You know where the magic happens.
It's important.
That's right here. But and it's by design as well. I know that you're not an extroverted founder, and I know that there are many kids or wannabe founders or people in miserable jobs right now that also think that they can't do it or can't do something because of their personality type, because the fact that they walk into an event and they feel immediately under pressure and anxious. And the whole reason why I asked you on the podcast in the first place was to help people like that, because I know that it's not your natural state, so it is very deliberate. But I won't grill you too much anyway. So,
Grill away.
Yeah. And so you're a kid, very, very clever. It's interesting that you've made that, you've created that kind of difference between clever, intelligent, reading, writing, and academia, because they are two separate things. Whereas I know from a parent's perspective, we often put those into one bucket. Your kids are either academic or they're not. The ones that are good at reading and writing, we label them as academic. And we also make them do things like higher maths because they're academic, right? They're bound to be able to do it. And the ones that aren't good at reading or writing are non-academic. So I really think that's an interesting perspective. And if there are parents listening, that's just really helped me to make that divide. My son sounds very much like you. He loves to read and write, but isn't what I'd say is as an academic. So let's take you back to those times. And can you remember a distinctive time in your younger years that you said, actually, I am aware of the why. I'm aware of why I am like this, and I excel in some areas and not in others. And How did that then make you realize that entrepreneurship, founding companies, not kind of doing regular jobs was for you? And also, I'm interested as a secondary question, because you can't just go from school to going, well, some people can, but I'm interested to know whether there were jobs on the way as well and what they were, because I'd love to picture you doing like bog standard jobs, because I can't imagine it.
Yeah, I think it's, I think I've been quite vocal about this in the past, where the term entrepreneur is one I struggle with. It's not something that resonates with me, but when I use it, it's in a context that allows people to understand what it is I'm trying to articulate. So if I cast my mind back again, even to school days, I was that archetypal kid that I ran a tuck shop out of my rucksack on the school playground. So you'll probably find more sweets in my bag than books. And I knew that had probably gotten out of control when at the start of lessons, teachers would start trying to buy from me as well. So it was probably at that point, it was like, okay, I need to stop this now. But I guess that ability to speak, sell, engage, whatever you want to call it, was there from the early days. I would say that was probably quite subconscious for a while. So again, something I explored during my MBA about myself, where again, to that piece where other people have pushed me into these positions, it takes certain moments for you to realize. So when you ask that question, and my brain immediately went to, and it ties into your question about jobs, one that I had during my degree program. So I actually worked for BlackBerry. There'll be hopefully a contingent of younger listeners listening to this and have no idea what that is.
Hello.
But I'd probably join there at the worst possible time. But aside from that, I always remember that he was the marketing director at the time. So we were doing a piece of work for him. And as part of having to get a sort of 360 feedback report, I asked him to do so. And he wrote quite eloquently about how he'd observed that how I operated on that project, the energy I brought, how I felt, transcended through to everybody else in that project. And that's the first time, I think, where I realized, oh, actually, who I am and the way I do things is a lot more influential than I realize.
Oh, wow.
So every time, ever since that moment, whenever I'm speaking to somebody, thinking about it, that really is what sparked me to sort of carry myself the way I do now.
That's an amazing story. I think if there are people that are listening that aren't in founders or they're in leadership roles, I think that's just a lesson of never underestimating the impact that you can have on somebody's life, essentially, by not holding back with that feedback, because that is basically told you or made you see the light and see, actually, wow, I didn't realize I had such an influence. But a lot of leaders wouldn't have actually taken the time to do a piece on that. So I suppose I can see why that would be kind of major
100%.
milestone.
And then, yeah, I think you picture me doing jobs. I mean, I have done them. I've swept floors, I've made teas, I've worked in supermarkets. I think, again, background, I come from a very working class environment. My parents, both warriors in their own way, but not entrepreneurial by any stretch. Again, when we talk about the distinction between intelligence and academia, my mom, very creative in her intelligence, not remotely academic. My dad, probably one of the smartest people I know, but also very risk averse, and his reasons for it were entirely valid. And as you grow older, you can start to understand, respect and appreciate those, especially now being a parent myself. But yeah, I think work ethic was instilled into me from an early age. So it was like, okay, you're 16. If you want to, again, I'm sounding old, if you want to top up your phone credit, you go and get a job and you pay for it, that kind of thing. So I've worked pretty much every week of my life since I was 16. So yeah, for me, it was never about specific jobs or anything like that. I've always tried to look at the professional environment, whether that is sweeping a floor or on a checkout or being a junior consultant or whatever, and actually what can I take from it? What lessons can I learn? What value can I extract from that situation? And, you know, we talk a lot about transferable skills and these things, and I think you can always learn something different, something new and valuable in everything. I think up to that point, pretty much after graduating, you could call it my first proper job, if you like, life outside of the education system. So BlackBerry actually tried to get me to come back, but I think the writing was on the wall there at that time. So I took a job in a big retailer in their tech team. I lasted 7 or 8 months. What I found at that point in my life. And again, reflecting back on other things, is that my face didn't probably fit the typical corporate culture. So I made the decision, what could have probably been a job for life, to leave that. And then that's the point at which I was like, okay, it's time to go it alone.
Yeah. You mentioned your MBA, so just let's spend a couple of minutes talking about that, because I know you've touched on a couple of really interesting subjects as part of that. So tell us a little bit about that.
I think I always knew I wanted to do it. Again, something I've learned later in life is actually really enjoy learning. But you probably hit on the nail in the question you asked before around some of the gaps, let's say, in the conventional education system as it is today. And I could talk till I'm blue in the face about how
We're coming to that, don't
about
you
how
worry.
broken I think it is, but
yeah,
that's fine.
wait,
We'll
don't
speak.
you worry.
No, fine.
I'm building up to it.
So from that standpoint, I was like, well, yes, it's something I want to do for me. I wanted to do it because A, I thought it would be valuable. B, it gave me some credibility. So when you're a young person in very senior situations, there can be a propensity to view age as a barrier to your competency, when actually it's not. So for me, those 3 small letters made a difference in boardroom conversations, because it was like, okay, well, he sort of knows what he's talking about. Notwithstanding the fact that I knew it would be a good networking opportunity as well. So I didn't go into it thinking, I'm going to learn loads about business, because I was probably more unique in the group we were in, because I'd done a lot of things, worked in a lot of different functions within companies. Whereas, I'd be there with, let's say, an operations director at the NHS who hasn't necessarily had exposure to finance or marketing or whatever, whereas I'd done all those things. But what it really was a good introspection, a good reflection, actually forced me to interrogate things that had happened up to that point as a leader, as a founder, as a business person, and to really just make sense of them. So in a way, I guess this is kind of timely, because I've done all that in the past. But yeah, I think it was great in helping me realize what I wanted, what motivated me, what drove me. And that's probably a lot of what you see from me today.
Would you recommend it to others? Because I know it always kind of divides the room a little bit as to its value.
I think its value is waning.
Right.
And I think part of that is a symptom of the conventional education system and people being more analytical of it. Did I learn much? Not really, apart from the piece I just said about myself, which I think is valuable, don't get me wrong, but I think there's other ways probably could have achieved that. I think the credibility helped. Because of the situation that I was in, I didn't look at it going, I'm going to double my salary or triple my salary in the way some people might. But I think that credibility helped. And actually, above all else, I think the networking from it. So I've made some friends for life, won a client from it, hired a couple of people from it. So it paid for itself.
Yeah.
How valuable it was as what it's potentially intended to be on paper as an education piece, I question, certainly for the price.
I think you question most things when it comes to education. So let's go there now. What's your kind of, you can be as controversial as you like. And as a parent and as somebody who is very similar to you in that I've got a full set of national insurance contributions since I was 16. I've always worked. And so I have my own opinions, and some of them I think we definitely share. But let's share that with other people now. And tell us about your experience, your opinions, and where do you think things are broken?
I think the system, it seems to penalise difference and ambition and reward conformity. I think a lot of it is designed, and look, I'm rational about it. There's these things take time and money, and it can be clear economically that is a problem for us in this country. But I think the things that we're educating into young people are they're not fit for the future, not fit probably even for the place we're in now as a country and as a society. So one of the clear examples I always draw up to people is I remember being sat in geography as a kid and learning about rock types. How great if geology is your future calling. For 99.99% of us in that room, it's not. So I question what value that gives to me as a student in that class. By the same token, we're not giving really any financial literacy to young people. So when they go out into this world of credit cards and mortgages and finance and loans and all these things, they don't really understand it. So They're not being set up for success, in my opinion, in the society that we're in today. They seem very quick to label children with things, and actually difference is important. It's not something that, interestingly enough, some of our businesses, again, probably consciously gone for. Like I struggle with some of those, and I get it, and it has to happen, but it's like giving a person a position in a business because of ticking a diversity box. Our approach has always been the right person for the right job. Now, interestingly, along the way, when we look back, actually, it's been an incredibly diverse set of people that we've hired and worked with and promoted, not by design, by chance. But I think that's probably because myself and the people I'm surrounded with view different perspectives from lots of different individuals as important, and we can't all just conform to this single path that often I feel the school system tries to put you down.
And that's the financial literacy thing. That's an obvious gaping hole. And even parents chatting in the playground, they don't have to be in business to know that, frustratingly, our kids leave school having no clue about how to save or anything to do with money. Interestingly, I spoke to Royd and Greaves last week, and we were talking about the lack of knowledge around pensions. It's all kind of feeds into the same thing. So everyone knows this. It's not a secret. Why is nothing being done, in your opinion?
Again, I'm not a policy maker, I suppose, so it's hard to say. But I think, as I said before, sort of desire, resources, funding to make some of these changes is part of the issue. I guess more fundamentally, do we as a society at the higher levels become more wealthy through that conformity? And what I mean by that is it therefore not in the interests of government, whomever, to actually educate people on it in the first place? I don't know. I see things like, I look at something like Apple Pay, Google Pay as an example. It's quite interesting because I see that as sleepwalking into not understanding the value of a pound. And we've been quite clear with our daughter that she needs to touch and feel money as much as understand about contactless, because super easy to just go and tap and £14 gone without actually realising, in the good old days, where you handed £20 over and got your £6 change back, what that looked like and felt like to you. So lots of things like that, I think, play into this newer generation that, having a young child that's going to grow up into it, I worry a lot about. So I feel, therefore, it's my responsibility and obligation as that parent to try and educate those things into her. And I was fortunate enough that I had that education from my parents as well, which not everybody gets.
No, and it's actually made me think now, because my kids have got the online cards, and my eldest son did his first couple of shifts on his first ever job. Super proud, by the way, because my son finished his last exam last Tuesday and started his new job on Wednesday. So really, hopefully following no downtime. So hopefully following in the family footsteps there. But the point was that he came back on Sunday and he'd been paid in cash. I'm not going to say the name of the burger place. And he came back, he's got like a wad of £10 notes in his hand, and we were outside because it's a nice day, we were having lunch, and he came back and he literally was like buzzing because he's had that much money on his card loads of times, like birthdays, Christmas, and it's just like indifferent until it runs out, and then he's like, can you top me up? But when he had and he couldn't stop looking at them, and you could tell he was, because he worked for it, and that's really important, but also, you're right, that kind of touch and feel, tangible money, I think, is really something we can take away from this, to say, don't be too quick to, whilst obviously the way that the world is going now and going down digital route is so good in so many ways, let's not go too far with that. And I like the term sleepwalking as well, because it's a double click, isn't it? Everything is just too quick. Yeah, and you think that is a deliberate thing as well, which is a really interesting perspective. And you said that you've taken some of those values, shall we say, into parenthood. What about into business? Because at some point you've gone from, I think, even though you've had your jobs and gone through, I think it's probably safe to say that you were always going to end up doing what you're doing now. I think the from what I can hear, the signs were always there. You know, you've got teachers buying sweets out of your rucksack before lesson in the morning. It's like, you're not going to end up in a 9-to-5
Probably
office
not,
job.
no.
Something would have had to go wrong in between. No offense to anybody that is in a 9-to-5 office job, but that obviously was not your destiny in any way. So it's no surprise that you got there. But, you know, you've got a very high moral high ground, and you've got a lot of very strong controversial opinions, beliefs and values as well, which many people listening to this will absolutely resonate with and agree with. Have you taken any of that into business when you've looked at companies that you want to invest in or get involved in? How has that managed to kind of manifest itself in the founder life?
Yeah, and it's, for me, and again, it's, you say about values instilled into me, it's kind of, one has always been never look down on someone unless you're helping them up. So a lot of the way I put people at the center of everything. I think that is probably a characteristic from my mum. She will be the first person to put everybody before herself, and I see a lot of that in me and the way I do things. So to that end, I think what matters to me most is the individual or the founding team. So yes, I want great ideas and I want to see the potential in something, but what I want is incredible people with exceptional talents at the forefront of those. So I think when I look at the more recent portfolio that I'm actively involved in, I think that is absolutely 110% true in every circumstance. So those businesses are led by incredible people, and I feed off that ambition and energy. Indirectly, I think, you know, I've done a lot of probably reflecting and soul searching over the years, and I know now that I'm not a leader made for peacetime. Maybe that's a theme that's run through some of the stories we've covered here, but I don't do well when it's stability, it's incremental growth, it's process. Actually, I'm the wartime guy. It's gritty, it's early, it's messy, as ideas, we're failing hard, failing quick, iterating, innovating, and that is where I personally thrive the best, and where I also think, based on experience, I add the most value to people. So you're not going to get me out of bed in the morning with the chance to grow a team to this certain level or take up a footsie job or whatever. Those things don't compute with me. And again, I think some of that comes back to the preferring to be behind the scenes, and I think that's easier to do in those earlier days in businesses. But as they become more established and the market, so to speak, makes certain demands of those companies, that's where the face becomes of significance, and it tends to be, I've already gone by that point.
So for other founders that have that same kind of attitude, that wartime attitude, which I totally love and buy into, it's in quite a few people. But ultimately, you've got to keep the lights on, and your business will fail pretty quickly if you run out of cash, which is the reason why most startups fail.
For sure.
From a practical perspective, how can founders who have so much talent to grow businesses very quickly, very big risk for appetite, very intelligent, there's so many of them that just, you know, maybe they haven't come from families with lots of money, maybe they don't have lots of savings, but they have all of the other makings of a business, and they've got, I don't know, 30, 40K runway. How can those guys, it's a different time at the moment for, you know, investors and things like that. Do you have any practical tips around how can they fund their businesses to make sure that they don't end up on the pile?
I think if I had a silver bullet for that, I could have retired a long time ago. But I think, yeah, it's an interesting one. So it's something I'm very in on, but I also wrestle with a bigger context of the challenges that it's going to probably bring for us as a society. Anything like that you can use that is cost effective to create efficiency is going to help. One of the things that I'm a pretty big advocate of is that hiring people to do the things you're not good at is the wrong place to start from. So it's super easy if you're a founder saying, I know nothing about finances, let me go and bring in a finance manager as an example.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that personally, because one of the issues that you'll face as a founder is that if you assume your employees, because at the end of the day, that's what they are, they've taken a job offer from you, will see the company through your founder lens. They won't. And what they will do is they'll leave because employees leave, because that's what happens. If you put all of your eggs in that finance manager's basket and they leave, who's going to pick that up? So what I've always tried to tell people from my just own experience and view on things is that you need your organization to be built around systems. And I mean that as a catch-all term, not just to mean tech, but the how you do things, why you do things, who does them, and then get people to run those systems. Because the second you do that, if your finance manager leaves, it should be very clear to somebody stepping into that role what the expectations of a finance manager in our business are. So I think that's super important, and it's one that I see people get caught out on because it tends to be even an investment scenario. We need to scale the team. It's bums on seats rather than the right hires.
Yeah.
Actually, it's super interesting when someone gets a couple of million quid dropped in their account from a VC or a PE, and it's like, okay, now what? Actually, sometimes my advice is to stop for a second and let's just take stock and let's think about how we do this in the correct way, rather than, okay, let's just go and boom and spend and hire and whatever else, because it's often those ones that I see dry up a lot faster.
Yeah.
So
doesn't go a long way in the end, does it?
no, it doesn't. And it's this weird scenario where it can be like, I need £2 million for 18 months. And some people go, I think you're going to run out faster than that. And it's like, okay, so you're telling me how to spend this money now. So
yeah,
it's
particularly when you're hiring people, those salaries
Yeah.
do add up, and we've got lots of
huge.
Yeah.
So for me, it's a bit of that. It's a bit of, okay, how can you generate efficiency from the outset? And probably all those things culminate in just getting the organization structurally right. And again, that's something that I've learned the hard way. I've done it right, I've done it wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm sure I'll do it right and do it wrong some more, but that tends to be how I've found success.
And so we are where we are now. It's 2025. Little Luke's all grown up and has major impacts across from school, uni, MBA, whatever, and many, many businesses. So what does the world look like for you now? Where have you got to? And are you, because obviously little Luke is now got a little Luke of girl little Luke of his own. And so the Luke, the parent, the now serial founder, as I've just labelled you, super successful. I'm sure you're very comfortable financially. Like, what does life look like for you now?
Everyone has always said to me that parenthood will change you. And that is true. That's 100% true, because you move from this position of, in a way, selfishness it sounds like a harsh, dirty word, but you don't really have to think about anybody but yourself. And that's gone. That's out the window forever. And it's no longer about you anymore. It's about this this small person that you've brought into the world. So I've found joy in having her in our lives. And now when I go into a working day, she's at the back of my mind thinking, okay, well, everything I do is about her now. I think being a bit more, again, selfish, to use the word, but time is one of the only non-physical assets that I have. I'm very poor on it for all the reasons we've just discussed, but it's important to make time and to separate, for me, personal and professional. So it's tough to do. And I know there'll be a lot of founders along the way that have made a hell of a lot of sacrifices. I have as well, Can't really remember the last time I had a holiday where I didn't have a call or take a message or something work-wise, and you can never quite get away from it. But I think so long as you are clear in some of those boundaries about when you might be available, and actually I'm going to put this time aside and we'll speak then, versus I'm just constantly available, I think that matters. Again, having soul searched on a number of fronts, the less involved operationally I can be in businesses, the better I am for everybody else in the professional setting, but also from a personal perspective as well, because I think I am more energized, more happy, more at ease with the way things are. So I think with where I am at the moment, it's probably just a tidying up my own position and making sure that I'm there and involved in the things that are bringing that energy and joy to me from a professional standpoint, but ensuring that amongst all that I make time for family, including amongst that an extremely supportive wife.
Is what you say about every successful.
It's very true. It is true.
It's the other way around for me, but it sounds like she's been pivotal to, well, your little girl has been kind of pivotal to you also saying, okay, I don't need to be available all of the time. I do for her, but I don't for you guys. Put some time in my diary or whatever. It's actually quite a hard thing to do, isn't it? I'm terribly guilty of being like, yeah, I can do that. Yeah,
I
I can do
know.
that. I know. How am I going to do
I'll
that?
call you at 8 at night and you'll answer.
And I know I'm terrible for it, but I need to get there as well. And it sounds like she's been a real turning point there. Are you in business then? Are you still kind of growing your portfolio? Are you ramping up? Or actually, is it a case of you've done so much and now it's more about having that balance between personal life and work?
I think probably more the latter. There's some things that I've pushed aside. Those were probably primarily just cash investment. So I'm probably rationalizing that down a bit. And as I sort of alluded to before, it's just like, I'll get out of bed in the morning for really exciting people, ideas, ambition, whatever it might be. And to me, that doesn't even necessarily feel like work. And the second it does is the second I'll start to probably question my role in that. But yeah, I think with the sort of portfolio that I've got right now, the ones that I'm a bit more sleeves rolled up supporting, those are exciting for me. And they're all almost exclusively, as I said, in that kind of wartime phase. And so therefore I'm going, this is great, this is fun, this is what it's supposed to be like. Again, I don't think it's for everyone, as you touched on before. And, you know, to be a kind of a founder type, people talk about it as if there is one. I'm not so convinced. I'm certainly not the smartest guy in the room. Sometimes maybe, but certainly not all the time. But what I've often found is the thing that differentiates is that resilience. Like, you've got to be super comfortable just living in this constant pendulum swing of fear and elation. Like, there's highs, there's lows, there's wins, there's losses. And just being comfortable where that pretty much is your day, and the risks and rewards and sort of headaches and energy that come with it. And it's not for everybody. I've said it publicly before to people that, you know, being an expert in your craft for someone else's business is admirable as well. So don't necessarily buy into the social media hype that you have to be a founder because everybody's doing it. That's the wrong reason.
Yeah, there will be definitely podcast guests that I bring in that don't have their own businesses, but they've got that founder mentality. They're people that are super interesting. They love creating things. They are not too risk adverse. All of these qualities that everyone on that couch pretty much shares across in some way, shape or form. But they happen to also have a job on PAYE. I think, founder story is more about a mentality and an attitude as opposed to, what's on your pay slip. So I completely agree with that. Just staying on relationships just for a second, I'm conscious that before we get into what's next for you, your story is largely a very, very happy one. And, you've gone from having a decent education, sounds like an absolutely awesome family that you came from, into the world of business. You're still very young now and you've cracked it. Now you've got your own family and actually sounds like tickety-boo. I want to just go back to relationships for a second. And, I think there are skeletons in the cupboard on every founder's journey, and the stress that the journey puts on relationships, whether that's friends, whether that's family, whether it's wife, girlfriend, husbands, children, you can't get to where you've got to without having some darker days around those types of relationships. And we haven't spoken about that. So if you don't mind, has it been as amazing as it all sounds? I'm imagining you skipping through a meadow at the moment. So
not remotely. If anything, quite the opposite in a lot of ways. And I think that comes down to some of that grind and work ethic character and that resilience piece I mentioned. So education, I grew up in a very poor part of the UK. It wasn't a particularly great school. Again, when you look at intellect versus academia, I think I sat the 11 plus, but because I'm not an exam-y person in that way, I actually don't think I passed it. But I think deep down, I probably knew whichever school I went to, I would find my own way through it, probably regardless of the setting and the teachers and things. Home life plays a massive role, that's for sure. And I look at a lot of people in the area I grew up with that have taken more difficult paths, and often it was home life that was different. So I'm forever grateful for the stability that I had there, because I think that was fundamental. You do need a big dose of luck in this game, and I'm not going to pretend I haven't had it. And people that don't acknowledge it, yeah, that's frustrating for me because it plays a role. And then I think, I've lost friends along the way because they probably don't necessarily understand your ambition or why you're not as available or why your relationship with them's changed. I think acquaintances, it's very easy for people to want to ride your coattails. So you have to be careful of that if you're someone that starts to become more successful, because again, human nature can be to just grab onto that to generate your own success. As I alluded to before, I'm still waiting for that holiday where I don't have to do some work. So what you need is that support network. And as I said, I've been super fortunate that my wife's an incredibly understanding person, incredibly supportive, and kind of the commitment we'd always made to each other is that how much you give to your relationship is going to ebb and flow. But if we can look back when we're on our deathbed and kind of say, A, we gave it our best shot, and B, broadly speaking, it was 50-50, then we'll have made peace with it. So I think at this point in our lives, I'm probably, commanding more of the professional energy perhaps than her, but that will change in the future because it's just the way it is. Yeah, and family has played a big role.
Yeah.
That's helped. Oddly, very successful in their own ways, siblings as well. So I think it would be remiss of me not to obviously talk about the impact they have on you as well. And I'm the youngest of three, so again, when you talk about some of the traits and how you were as a young person, I think a lot of people with 3 children are like, yeah, the third one just sort of slots into your life. So supposedly I could dress myself, read and write before I went to school. But I think a part of that was the more children you have, maybe you'll say it with 2.
I've got 3.
3, sorry.
Yeah.
The independence you say in the last one compared to the first one might be night and day. And I think you have the luxury as the youngest of going, I've seen the mistakes made before me and not to make, and I think that probably made you grow up a bit faster as well. So I'm pretty sure I skipped those teenage years because I don't really remember being a teenager.
Yeah,
I was probably 21 when I was 12, if you ask most people that knew me that.
Were you a teenager in the 90s, right? 2000s?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're probably just partying the whole time. That's why you can't remember.
Maybe. I'm not sure I did. I think I'd probably, as I said, back to who I am, I'd probably find more...
Was that not for you?
More peace in a book than I would do in that.
Oh,
maybe I saved a bit of that for university instead. But yeah, I've always probably been a bit old before my time. And people listening to this that know me will laugh and say 100%, I'm sure.
Well, Luke, you've definitely emphasised the stories part of Founder Stories. I think it's been a really good tale, and it's really interesting for me to kind of piece everything together, and a lovely cohesive journey. So let's finish on the future. You don't strike me as somebody that really knows what that looks like.
Oh, definitely not.
But there's 2 parts to this. Obviously, what is the plan for you? You're a family man, you want to try and get that balance back. But just going back to your knowledge of things like our economy, the country, AI, what's happening, the whole sleepwalking thing, what do you think's next for everybody else? Like, what do you see on the horizon for us?
Yeah, I think from a personal standpoint, as I mentioned, there's a bit of a consolidation going on. I've always been someone where, and I know we've talked in the past that, kind of how money motivates people. I'm not actually, which may sound ridiculous, that money motivated. There's always an interesting kind of a study that I recount. I think Google did it, where it's like they paying people what they think they're worth, because any less, they worry how they're going to pay bills. Any more, they're worrying how to spend their money. And while that's not quite who I am, I think it's true that A, I don't live a particularly lavish lifestyle, but B, just enough that I don't have to think about it is fine. As I said before, I couldn't imagine being a billionaire, a footsie, just none of that interests me at all. In fact, it sounds quite tiring and stressful. So for me, what my probably real passion is that charity space. So when I reached the stage of quote mark retirement, people always said, you'll never retire, you could never not work. And maybe part of that is true, but it's about what I devote my time and energy to. So I'd like to spend some of my personal resource, time, financial, whatever, in that space, in founders, ideas, individuals, ways that are trying to turn that sector around and kind of help the less fortunate. I think in terms of the bigger picture societally, as I said, I have to wrestle a lot with AI because I'm very very much an advocate of it and the power of what it can do, and certainly in a business context. But as you said, with my sleepwalking analogy, I think we're going into the biggest socio-economic change since the Industrial Revolution, and I don't actually think it's entirely a technological one. There is a moral piece to this as well, where the idea that we can suddenly retrain and reskill at a pace that is in tow with the way the technology is moving just simply isn't true. So how many people in perhaps more white-collar entry-level jobs will be staring down the barrel of a promise made to them by the world that if they work hard, do well at school, get an education, apprenticeship, a degree, whatever that looks like, the opportunities will be available for them at the other end. And I think AI is rapidly shifting the landscape of that. And for me, again, as a parent, that worries me about the future of my own child. But I think it's going to be a really interesting next sort of 10, 20, 30 years. And hopefully policymakers, governments can kind of wrestle with it and get a grip on it before potentially the world sort of tears itself apart in the process.
Yeah, and getting ahead of that education system seems like the first natural step to that. It's at least let's start to prepare people much better, because I've seen, you're absolutely right, the speed in which technology's moved is now even made an even bigger gap between what our kids are learning at school and what you need to be able to survive in the world of business. It was big anyway, because like you say, knowing about rocks is only good if you want to work in rocks. So it was already large, but I think it's now huge, and that is quite scary. But not to leave on a negative or to scare all of the listeners. Talk to us about one kind of nugget of brilliance, one pearl of wisdom that you've taken that's maybe been something you've learned throughout the years, or something that you've applied through luck that's actually really worked really well, that might help anybody on the founder journey right now. Putting you on the spot a little bit, but I'm sure there are many.
I think it would be unfair for me to obviously put founders generically into this camp. But again, one of the things that I'm kind of a proponent of is that doing it when you're at a point of least obligation in your life. I think actually, ironically, things like AI and some of the tooling that's available in order to create structure around a business now has perhaps made it a bit easier than it would have traditionally been. But I look back and go, I did it when I was early 20s. And I look at myself now and go, imagine if I was trying to do that now when I have a family and a child and all those things. And, you're already energy sapped and time poor, as I mentioned before. So hats off to anybody that manages to find that balance. And again, that formed part of the risk averse nature of my dad. It's because, he was the sole income with a mortgage and 3 children and a family and stuff. So I get it. Interestingly, some of the founders that I've found a lot of energy in have been ones that are older. So they've gone and done the job and all that stuff, families, they've grown up and are now in a situation where they're like, this is my time.
Yeah, I'm so with them right now.
Maybe. So I'm like, actually, yes, great. That again, you're in a position probably of less obligation, responsibility, just in a different way than maybe you were in your early 20s or whatever. So for me, if you're thinking about it, providing your reasoning for starting something has kind of logic to it, as I talked about before, because you hate your job, that's not a reason to go and start a company. I just want a new job, right? And to that end, I think, it's something I say a lot as well, that knowing how to do technical work, i.e. your profession, is not the same as running a business that does technical work. So just because you can develop web apps doesn't mean you know how to run a business that sells the service of developing web apps. They're two completely different ways of thinking, skill sets, etc. So I think for me, if you're certain it's what you want, timing will be everything in that.
And then just call you and you'll give them some money, right?
Hopefully we'll start with some consultation and advice first, and I can inspire, and then we'll talk about money.
Sorry, I missed a couple of steps there. Luke, it's been so good talking to you. I could talk to you for another 3 hours. And I'm sure everyone would love to listen to you for another 3 hours. But you're very visible on LinkedIn. People can find you. You've been putting some really good content out recently and some good advice as well. So I'd urge anybody to link in with you, even if it's just to consume your content, and they may get some value out of that as a founder. But yeah, hopefully that wasn't too anxious as a questioning.
I'll sleep well tonight.
You just absolutely let rip there. You seem very, very comfortable. So thank you so much, and we'll catch up again soon.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
You.